Hello everyone and welcome to the Green Man channel. Hope you're all doing good and well. So it's time for me to reveal the albums which I would actually score 10 out of 10 if I were to do full-length reviews for each of these albums. And, I'll say up front that this is, as always, going to be very much down to my subjective feeling about these records. And I'll be honest, I'll say, maybe there is a bit of sentimentality attached to some of these records as well. And that's hard to avoid, even with albums that you think are perfect. And another thing I'll say is maybe you will disagree or maybe you will agree. Please do put your own choices in the comments for albums you regard as perfect scores, as 10 out of 10s or 5-star records. Let me know in the comments. Or maybe if you just have one that you think is a masterpiece, a true flawless masterpiece, let me know in the comments. I'd be interested to know what your choices are. Now, some of these choices are quite recognizable. I'm sure that some of you will think, oh yeah, that's an iconic album. Some of them are a lot less well known, I would argue, and therefore would be ones I'd say do check them out. They are records which have managed to go, under the radar of so many people within their genres, and it feels criminal to me when these albums are so good that they have gone under the radars of lots of people. So I'm going to start here with my first choice of an album which I regard very much as a 10 out of 10, and I know there are many out there in the prog sphere that would agree actually on this one, I think, and I'm sure there are some that would disagree too, but my first choice here is Steven Wilson's Hand Cannot Erase. And I'm just going to read something which I read from loudersound.com, which is quoting Stephen, I think, where he says, "I saw this documentary, Dreams of a Life, about this woman who seemed to have everything going for her in her life, and yet when she died, she remained undiscovered for something like 3 years. It really stayed with me, and obviously went on to inspire Hand Cannot Erase." And I don't think I've known an album that has so vividly brought to life the story of someone as Hand Cannot Erase. I mean, it's tear-inducing at times, this album. It's incredibly powerful, really sad, really tugs at the heartstrings, but it's so well put together. It's one of the best progressive rock albums you're ever likely to hear. It's just really well structured, perfect, typical Steven Wilson production. This album to me is a 10 out of 10, and yeah, I don't think that is one I'll ever change my mind on for this list. Now, next up, I'm talking about a band called Cybre and their album Antares. This came out in 2007 and is one which I suspect out of many of these on these lists you probably don't know unless you're avid industrial metal fans. This band, even within the realm of industrial metal, perhaps aren't super well known. Very influential. I think they've gathered something of a cult following, largely due to lots of digital sales after many of physical copies of their albums have sold out. But this album Antares is quite something. And I think, again, cohesion is something that really brings out the power of this record as you go from song to song. The melodies are fantastic. They sort of combine, I would say, something of a Tesseract sound with a Meshuggah sound, incorporating wonderful vocal lines into their songs, and really memorable tracks that are quite stunning to listen to. This album from start to finish, I feel, is quite a perfect album. There's a bit of variety where you might not expect that on this kind of an album, but I do think it presents just about enough variety for me to still think it's, I'd give it a 10 out of 10. I think it is just superb. And yeah, this is a great record. I love tracks like Ego Bypass Generator, Neurodrive, and the closer, Eternity, and massively, epic outro to this album, which I highly encourage you to listen to. But make sure you listen to this whole album. I think if you're into industrial metal particularly, you're going to thoroughly enjoy this release from Cybre back from the 2000s, back from 2007. Next up, I'm choosing a melodic death metal album that I'm sure many death metal and melodic death metal fans are going to recognise. Of course, when I say the band name In Flames, you're probably wondering which album I'm going to pick. And actually, I wouldn't necessarily say that this is my favourite In Flames album, but as I said at the start, sometimes your perfect albums aren't necessarily also your favourites. And I think Colony, to me, is a perfect In Flames album because it has everything I love about In Flames on it, for a start. I think the production's pretty stellar. I think some of the vocal performance from Anders in this album is just, it's some of his best vocals personally. And interesting, this is the first time the band tuned down, would down tune their guitars from C standard, with Ordinary Story and Connolly being dropped to A sharp. Now, I'm not really particularly knowledgeable in musical theory. I have a very vague understanding of what that means, but that's one for you music geeks out there, with something perhaps you didn't know about In Flames and Colony. Embodying Invisible, Ordinary Story and Resin are my three favourite songs from this album. It is just a wild ride from start to finish. Has everything you could want from a melodic death metal album. It has this sort of bounce to it as you go from track to track. It's got a certain fierceness to it as well, and the acoustic parts as well that you have, the acoustic song or two that you have on this album also really hits well, and I just think it brings together the best of what In Flames brought before this album, perhaps a little bit of a sign of what was to come on the next one as well, Clayman here, but yeah, it's a great record, In Flames Colony. Next time I'm talking about a shoegaze album, which I have mentioned on the channel many times before. This won't be surprising. It's Pink Shiny Ultra Blast and Everything Else Matters. And even within the genre of shoegaze, I feel like this album is still somewhat underappreciated, which is astonishing to me because it is such a great album. I'm going to read out a quote a writer from The Guardian. I will include links to these segments or articles in the YouTube description box once the video has gone up. But yeah, Barry Nicholson from The Guardian, I couldn't agree more with what he says here about this shoegaze album from Pink Shiny Ultra Blast. Most genre revivalists have the good fortune not to have to worry about competing with their progenitors. Then again, most genre revivalists aren't half as good or half as inventive as this. And here's the thing with this album that I've said ad nauseum, I'm going to say it again here because I just always feel very strongly about this record, Pink Shiny Ultra Blast's Everything Else Matters. I just feel that it's very layered. On first listen, you might think this just sounds like a typical shoegaze album, but the more you listen to it, the more enjoyable it becomes. It's hypnotic. As I say, it's layered. The bass work on this album is phenomenal. It is a great album that shines more and more the more time you give to it. And it's a great shame that I feel like even within shoegaze, this album doesn't get that much attention, or at least it should be regarded, I think, as an all-time classic in the genre. I'm gonna put myself out there and say that as a bold statement here. Next up, I'm going to talk about The Gathering and Mandy. I would score this album 10 out of 10. I won't spend super long talking about this one. I feel like I've talked about this one as well a few times on the channel. And, Angry Metal Guy's writer actually said, Mandy was where The Gathering got their formula right. And the positivity of Anneke van Giersbergen's vocals, her first album with the band, as I recall, really shines through here. And for me, it's an album which is like a musical fairy tale. It's really enchanting. You have the sort of gloom and doom of the instrumentals, but in contrast to that, you have Anneke's really uplifting, soaring vocal lines in all of the songs pretty much here. And they give this album this sort of magical contrast. It's like I say, it's like a fairy tale brought to life in musical form. To me, Mandy Lion, it is just an absolutely stellar release. I couldn't stress enough how much I enjoy The Gathering's Mandy Lion. It's always been a 10 out of 10 since I listened to it not that long ago, only about 7 or 8 years ago I first listened to this album, but when I realised how good it was, I've listened to it so many times since then. Next up, I'm talking about Threshold's Hypothetical, the second album with Andrew McDermott as singer. I love Mac. He's probably my favourite singer from the Threshold band lineup historically. But, I love Damien and Glyn as well. They're all great singers, to be honest. But this one is, I'm going to use the word cohesive again here. And I just feel like all the big peak moments that you get from Threshold on here are some of the best in their discography. Mac's performance is otherworldly on a lot of these tracks. And as I say, it's a great prog metal album. bringing out some of the best songwriting elements that we see from that sort of threshold songwriting partnership. And it's a brilliant album, Hypothetical. That is my next choice. Now we're coming towards, we're moving back into a sort of, well, I say shoegaze. This is really a dream pop album, indie pop, if you will, from the duo from Baltimore known as Beach House. This was their third album, called Teen Dream. And an interesting bit of trivia about this album is apparently they recorded this in a converted church in upstate New York called Dreamland, I believe. So those of you that are in upstate New York perhaps know the church. But yeah, this is really, really beautiful album. Unfortunately, that's a word I use quite often. I can't think of another word right now to describe it. But there are so many great songs on here. I also feel this is relatively accessible, so if you're new to Beach House, this is a good one to get you into the band as well. And the songwriting here is nigh on perfect. And you often find with bands, 3 albums in, there's another third album coming up on this list, but 3 albums in, they tend to find their magic quite often. And, you know, this happened with Beach House's Teen Dream. I think Zebra's great. Used to be 10 Mile Stereo is one of my all-time favourite Beach House songs. You know, I love the way in that song it develops, the sort of the drumming part with what sounds like the hi-hats kind of rattling out when that sort of one of those last choruses comes in. I mean, you can't beat it. You can't beat it. So that's Beach House Teen Dream as my most recent choice for a 10 out of 10. Now we move on to Pink Floyd. Of course, I could choose a few albums here, I'm sure, because they have so many masterpieces, really, particularly in that 70s era. The one which I always go back to, actually, and which resonates the most with me is Wish You Were Here. And I guess this is one where it's hard to separate emotion and feeling about this album from, you know, wearing that sort of reviewer's hat and getting all fussy and picky about the album itself. But I genuinely think that there's not much to be too fussy about here. This is a genuinely great record with the memory of someone, sort of tribute to someone at its heart, Syd Barrett. And apparently this is David Gilmour and Rick Wright's favourite album as well. And I feel like this album was, well, one of the first albums where we saw that structure, that prog rock kind of classic album structure, where you have a long song at the start and a long song or a sort of continuation of the themes of that song in the last track, like the dovetail thing, where you have shorter tracks in the middle as well. I feel like this album is kind of one of the trendsetters there for that sort of structure of prog album, and it's an absolute classic. It's one of my favourites of all time. And next, I'm going to another progressive metal classic. We're talking about Opeth's Still Life. Again, another band where you could choose 3 or 4 different albums possibly as your perfect scores. For me, Still Life is the one which I find to be the most perfect, instrumentally, conceptually, lyrically, story-wise, musically, of course, as well. And I just find this album really compelling as a listen. For me, it has lots of great peak moments with both Michael Ackerfeld's harsh and clean vocals. There is an element of folk in here, the jazz of the sort of ever-present jazz inserts that you get with a lot of Opeth albums are also here as well. And it's a true classic in their discography for me, Still Life, from 1999, of course. And apparently due to time constraints, they could only rehearse the recording of this album, I think, twice over before they went into the studio to record it, which is absolutely astonishing to me, how with an album as complex as this, that these guys, I mean, they are Opeth, right? They're massively talented, but how you can do that is mind-boggling to me. My last choice is none other than the iconic Metallica and their third album, Master of Puppets. And I could really just leave it at that because, you know, I know many people out there that would agree on this one. I'm sure there are those that would disagree as well, once again. But this is an iconic album for any metalhead for me. The album covers become iconic. That album artwork has become iconic. The songs themselves, from start to finish. You know, there's one song on here where I almost hesitated to score this a 10 out of 10, which is The Thing That Should Not Be, where I just think it goes on a little bit long towards the end. And I'm thinking, does that make this album a 9.7 or 9.8, strictly speaking? I think if you're a nitpicker, maybe it does. But for me, I kind of round that up to a 10 out of 10, I think, here. And, you know, there's no questioning the absolute classic status of Master of Puppets. My favourite tracks really on here, the title track, which is their most played track live, Master of Puppets, Disposable Heroes, and Orion, one of the best instrumental tracks maybe there's ever been on a metal album. I'll you know, put my head above the parapet and say that one. But yeah, until I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. I am obviously at the moment trying to get the channel to build up some more subs to get us towards my goal, my personal goal of getting to 1,000 subscribers on the Green Man. And this might be the last time you see this background. I'm hoping I should finally be in my new place next weekend, but yeah, that's been a long time coming. And anyway, as always, as I always say at the end of these videos, until next time, it's bye for now.